Now, in this passage, David gives us an example of what to do when life falls apart. Think about it. So many things about David's life have come undone. His own son rebelling against him, his throne being stolen. He's no longer at home in the palace, but he's homeless in the wilderness. Now, these are in no particular order, but the first one on your fill in the blanks there, it says, put yourself last. Put yourself last. This goes against our natural self. We usually want to serve ourselves first, especially when we feel like life is falling apart around us. This is not only what David did, but it is what Jesus commands. David could easily have closed the gates of Jerusalem and prepared for battle. Let them come. I've got plenty of people to throw up on the fence as a pawn to protect me and my throne. After all, I'm the king. I'm the one in command. They're here to serve me. But David doesn't do that. David says, guys, get your shoes. We're getting out of here. You see, David didn't want to suffer himself, but he also didn't want his people, those loyal to him, and the city of Jerusalem to be destroyed because of that civil war. So don't serve yourself, serve others, even when you feel vulnerable, even when you feel like you are suffering. Here's the next one. When life falls apart, worship the Lord. Worship the Lord. It's easy to worship God on the sunny days, but when the storms of life come, our worship becomes much more meaningful. Consider what David might have focused on when he was on that top of the mountain. Oh, great, I'm running for my life again. God, why did you let my son do this to me? Or maybe simply, I'm getting too old for this. Once again. But instead, David made sure to worship, even in the storm, to thank God for his specific blessings and to praise God for who he is. You see, worship helps us remember that God is bigger than the storm that's raging around us. Next, when life falls apart, do what you can. Do what you can. David didn't do nothing. David didn't give up. But sometimes we feel like that, don't we? We're so overwhelmed that we just want to lay in bed and hide. Turn my phone off. I'm not here. Or we try to escape reality with entertainment or with our comforts or perhaps even with our sin. David made plans for some of his faithful men to infiltrate Jerusalem, to infiltrate Absalom's plans. And he made plans to counter Ahithophel's wise advice with Hushai's giving bad counsel. And so when life falls apart, don't focus on what you can't do. That's what I would do. I can't do that. I can't do this. Everything's going wrong. That's all I'm focused on. But focus on what you can do. That's what David did. But with that, as you do what you can, make sure you also pray. You pray. I don't pretend like this is some new, shocking revelation. Like, when life is falling apart, I should pray. I didn't think of that one. But if you're like me, you need to be reminded. Because I need to be reminded. You see, we don't often pray enough. Notice that David prayed specifically about his situation. He said, Lord, I'm sending men to give Absalom bad advice. I'm sending men to tell me what's going on from Jerusalem. But God, you need to be the one that turns Ahithophel's advice into foolishness. God, you need to be the one that delivers me from my own son. Other times, David simply poured out his heart to the Lord as he prayed. Probably during this very instance, this time in David's life, we read in Psalm 55 in verses 2 through 7. Look at David's prayer. He says, attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. Imagine what that would be. I mean, he genuinely believes that I might die at my son's hand. And he's physically trembling in his fear, feeling so overwhelmed. And so, verse 6, he says, "So I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness." If David had a car, he'd just hit I-5 and just go. Goodbye, I'm not coming back. But how wonderful that we have a God who's not only with us, but he listens to us as we cry out to him in the midst of our suffering. How much better to pour out your heart to the Lord than to another man or woman. Finally, the last thing to do when life falls apart is to surrender the outcome. Surrender the outcome. One of the things that we long for in our hearts is that of control. We want to be in control. We want to control our life. We want to control what happens next. We even want to control each other. When life is falling apart, we're reminded of how little control we actually have. And it's so tempting to try to grab and hold on to all the crumbling pieces in our life. But David didn't do that. He surrendered his situation to God, saying, if you bring me back from the wilderness, that'd be great. But if not, Lord, if you leave me there, that's fine. David trusted God with the outcome. And so my question for you is, what about you? Do you trust God with the outcome? Even if God says no to your greatest need or your greatest desire here on earth in this life, that thing that you're praying about, that thing that keeps you up at night, that thing that bothers you, that's such a burden, if God says no, is his grace sufficient for you? Will you be satisfied in his presence alone? Satisfied that we are promised an eternity with him. You see, the end of the book is written. We already know the ultimate outcome. That's his promise to all of you who have believed in Jesus. And so may we rest in him. Even when everything around us seems to be falling apart and changing day to day, may you rest in Jesus, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever.